Dante Alighieri tossed and turned in his bed. Sleep eluded him. Again. At 48, he was no stranger to restless nights. But this was different. This was relentless. Weeks had passed without proper rest. His mind raced with thoughts of poetry and politics, of love and loss, of heaven and hell. In the dim light of his Florentine bedroom, shadows danced on the walls. They seemed to mock him, taunting him with the promise of sleep that never came. Dante rubbed his tired eyes. He longed for just a moment of peace, just a brief respite from the constant whirl of his thoughts. The poet's quill lay untouched on his desk, ink dried on its tip. Words that once flowed freely now seemed trapped in his exhausted mind. Dante sighed. He knew the toll of sleeplessness all too well. It clouded his judgment. It twisted his perceptions. It made the line between reality and fantasy blur dangerously. As another hour ticked by, Dante felt his grip on consciousness slipping. But it wasn't the peaceful drift into slumber he craved. No, this felt different, heavier, more ominous. As his eyes finally closed, Dante felt himself falling, plummeting into a darkness deeper than any he had known before. The nightmare had begun. The fall seemed endless. Dante plunged through layers of consciousness, each more terrifying than the last. Wind rushed past his ears. It carried whispers of torment, of souls in agony. The poet's heart raced. Fear gripped him like a vice. This was no ordinary dream. Suddenly, impact. Dante found himself sprawled on cold, hard ground. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of sulfur. He struggled to his feet, his eyes strained to adjust to the gloom. Slowly, a hellish landscape came into focus. This was not the world he knew. Towering cliffs of jagged rock surrounded him. Rivers of fire snaked through the desolate terrain. In the distance, agonized screams echoed. Dante shuddered. He realized with growing horror where he had landed. This was Inferno, hell itself, but not as he had imagined it in his writings. This was something far worse. A sign loomed before him. Carved in stone, its message chilled Dante to his core. "Welcome to Inferno's nightmare," it read. "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." The poet swallowed hard. He knew he was in for a harrowing journey, one that would test his very soul. With trembling steps, Dante ventured forth into the nightmare realm. As Dante delved deeper into Inferno's nightmare, the true nature of this realm revealed itself. This was no mere representation of hell. It was a twisted reflection of human sin, a place where the darkest aspects of the soul were laid bare and punished, mercilessly. He passed circles of torment, each more horrific than the last. In one, the greedy were forced to carry massive weights, the burden of their earthly desires. In another, the wrathful tore at each other for eternity. Their anger never satiated. Dante's heart ached at the sight. He recognized the justice, but the cruelty was overwhelming. The air grew thicker with each step, filled with the lamentations of the damned. Dante struggled to breathe, to think clearly. He realized this place was designed to break the spirit, to crush all hope. But something within him refused to yield, a small spark of defiance, of faith. As he watched the suffering souls, a realization dawned on Dante. This place, terrible as it was, served a purpose. It was a mirror, a reflection of the consequences of one's actions in life. He saw that to escape, to truly escape, one must be good, must strive for virtue. The poet steeled himself. He knew the challenges ahead would be great, but he was determined to face them. In the midst of the infernal chaos, a familiar figure appeared. Dante's heart leapt with recognition. It was Virgil, the ancient Roman poet, his guide and mentor. Virgil's presence brought a sense of calm to the nightmarish landscape, a beacon of reason in a world gone mad. "Dante, my friend," Virgil spoke, his voice cutting through the din of tormented souls. "You find yourself in dire straits indeed." The older poet's eyes were filled with concern and wisdom. Dante felt a surge of relief. He was no longer alone in this hellish realm. Virgil wasted no time in offering counsel. "Listen well, Dante," he urged. "To survive this ordeal, you must shed your pride, your stubbornness." The words stung, but Dante knew their truth. He had always struggled with these flaws. Humility is your shield here, Virgil continued, and an open heart, your sword. As they walked together through the nightmare, Virgil explained further. This place feeds on arrogance, he said, on the belief that one is above judgment. Dante nodded, understanding dawning. He saw how his own pride had led him astray in life, how it could be his downfall here. With Virgil's guidance, Dante vowed to embrace humility. It was his only hope of escape. Section 5. The Path of Humility. Dante's journey through Inferno's nightmare took on new meaning with Virgil's words. Each step became an exercise in humility. The poet forced himself to look beyond the surface, to see the humanity in even the most wretched souls. It was a painful process, but a necessary one. He encountered a group of souls trapped in a pit of ice. Their sin, cold indifference to the suffering of others. Dante felt a pang of recognition. How often had he turned a blind eye to the plight of his fellow man? He knelt by the pit and offered words of comfort. It was a small act, but it warmed something within him. As they progressed, Virgil pointed out examples of humility. Souls who, despite their punishment, showed kindness to others, who accepted their fate with grace. Dante was moved by their strength. He saw that true power lay not in dominance but in compassion, in the ability to empathize with others. The path was not easy. Dante stumbled often, his old pride rearing its head at inopportune moments. But each time he caught himself and remembered Virgil's words. The poet began to feel a change within himself, a softening of his heart, a broadening of his perspective. He realized that to be truly good, one must first be humble. Section 6. Guardians of the Abyss. As Dante and Virgil ventured deeper into Inferno's nightmare, they encountered its fearsome guardians. These were no mere demons. They were manifestations of human vice, given terrible form and power. Each one a test, a challenge to Dante's newfound humility and resolve. The first guardian they faced was Cerberus, the three-headed hound of gluttony. Its massive jaws snapped at Dante, saliva dripping from razor-sharp teeth. The poet's instinct was to fight, to prove his strength, but Virgil's words echoed in his mind. Instead, Dante knelt and offered the beast, not violence but understanding. Next came Plutus, demon of greed. He tempted Dante with visions of wealth and power, riches beyond imagination. For a moment the poet wavered, but he remembered the souls trapped in ice, their cold indifference. Dante rejected the offer and chose instead the wealth of a clear conscience. With each guardian defeated, not through force but through humility and wisdom, Dante grew stronger, more sure of himself. He began to see these challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth, for redemption. The poet pressed on, ready to face whatever Inferno's nightmare had in store. Section 7. Battles in the Depths. The deeper Dante and Virgil ventured, the more intense the challenges became. They were no longer facing mere guardians, but embodiments of the darkest human impulses. Each battle was a struggle not just for survival, but for the very essence of Dante's soul. They encountered the Minotaur, rage incarnate. Its bull-like head swung wildly, eyes blazing with mindless fury. Dante's own anger rose to meet it, the frustration of his sleepless nights, the injustices he had faced in life. But he took a deep breath and remembered Virgil's teachings. Instead of fighting, he spoke to the creature, calmly, compassionately. The centaurs of violence charged at them next, their arrows darkening the sky. Dante's instinct was to run, to hide, but he stood his ground, met their charge with unwavering calm. He saw in their eyes the pain that drove their violence, and he felt pity, not fear. With each confrontation, Dante felt a shift within himself. The battles were changing him, molding him. He was becoming not just a survivor of Inferno's nightmare, but a transformed soul, one who could face the darkness both without and within, with courage and compassion. At the very heart of Inferno's nightmare, Dante faced his greatest challenge, Satan himself. The fallen angel was a terrifying sight, massive wings of shadow, eyes that burned with cold fire. He towered over Dante, a mountain of malevolence. The poet felt fear unlike any he had known. Satan's voice boomed across the infernal landscape. "So mortal," he sneered, "you think you can escape my realm?" His laughter shook the very foundations of hell. "I've broken stronger souls than yours." Dante trembled, but he did not back down. He remembered all he had learned on his journey. The Prince of Darkness offered Dante a choice. "Join me," he said, "rule by my side, or face eternal torment." It was a tempting offer. Power, freedom from fear. For a moment Dante wavered, but then he looked to Virgil, saw the faith in his mentor's eyes, and he found his strength. "No," Dante replied, his voice steady. "I choose neither power nor torment. I choose humility. I choose goodness." Satan roared in fury. The very air seemed to ignite, but Dante stood firm. He had faced his ultimate test, and in choosing righteousness over power, he had truly defeated the devil. With Satan's challenge overcome, Dante faced one final test, a test of faith. The landscape of Inferno's nightmare began to shift, to blur. Reality itself seemed to waver. Dante felt his grip on consciousness slipping. Was this the end of his journey, or just another trial? Virgil's form began to fade. "I can guide you no further," he said, his voice growing distant. "You must find your own way now." Panic gripped Dante's heart. He had come to rely on his mentor's wisdom. How could he go on alone? But he took a deep breath, remembered all he had learned. The poet closed his eyes, reached deep within himself. He found there a wellspring of faith, not just in divine power, but in the goodness of humanity, in his own capacity for growth and change. Dante opened his eyes, took a step forward, then another. He was forging his own path now. As he walked, the nightmarish landscape began to recede. The screams of the damned faded, replaced by a growing light. Dante realized this was the true test, not of his strength or cunning, but of his faith in the power of goodness, of humility. With each step, the light grew brighter, until it enveloped him completely. Dante's eyes snapped open. He found himself back in his Florentine bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows. For the first time in weeks, he felt rested, refreshed. But more than that, he felt changed. The nightmare had left an indelible mark on his soul. As he rose from his bed, memories of his journey flooded back. The horrors he had witnessed, the challenges he had faced, but also the wisdom he had gained. Dante walked to his writing desk, picked up his quill. He knew he had to record his experience, to share the lessons he had learned. The poet wrote feverishly. Words poured onto the parchment. He described the circles of hell, the souls trapped there. But more than that, he wrote of the transformative power of humility, of the strength found in compassion. His quill danced across the page, bringing Inferno's nightmare to life. As he wrote, Dante reflected on how his ordeal had changed him. He saw now the folly of pride, the danger of indifference. He vowed to live differently, to approach life with humility and openness, to strive always for goodness, not for reward, but because it was right. In the days that followed, Dante found himself profoundly changed by his experience in Inferno's nightmare. The world around him seemed different, brighter somehow. He saw opportunities for kindness and understanding where before he had seen only conflict. The poet's words, too, had taken on new depth and meaning. He shared his story with others, not to boast of his trials but to impart the wisdom he had gained. Dante spoke of the importance of humility, of recognizing the humanity in all people, even those we might consider sinners. His words touched many hearts, inspired changes both great and small. The nightmare had taught Dante the crucial importance of knowing right from wrong, not just in grand sweeping gestures but in the small everyday choices that shape a life. He saw now how easy it was to slip into sin, and how vital it was to remain vigilant, to always strive for goodness. As time passed, Dante's tale of Inferno's nightmare became legendary. It was more than just a story of horror and redemption. It was a guide, a roadmap for living a righteous life, for facing the darkness within oneself and emerging stronger. Dante had entered the nightmare a proud, stubborn man. He had emerged a humble, compassionate soul, and in doing so, he had lit a path for others to follow.